Great to have the opportunity to talk to you today, and thank you for giving up your time and supporting us. Now, it's a commonly held view that all businesses have a life journey. Today, we are focusing on a critical stage in a business's life journey. This session is entitled David and Goliath, reflecting the underlying principle that any business which has ambitions, in my experience, at a particular stage of development, has two fundamental options. The first option is to continue as is. Maybe it has some minor tweaks and plans for the longer term, but in essence, it remains the same operation under the same management and ownership structure. The other option is a big bang, option 2. So fundamentally, the ownership and control changes, either in whole or in part. And the founder's role is different. But of course, at that time, they will have extracted some value out of the businesses. The businesses that we are focusing on are those which have grown, are well-established, profitable businesses, probably been running for 6 or so years. They've been run and operated by the same founders, either in totality or majority. Now, they may have accepted some third-party investment, but that be from individual business angels, friends and family, but not from any institutions. From what I see in my experience, those owners have invested a huge amount of time and energy into their businesses, and in many cases have a legacy which they want to protect. However, many are seeking a different perspective. They might have some health issues, want to de-risk themselves, spend the money on their dreams. And of course, the pandemic and the ever-increasing pace of business change might have caused them rethink their values and what's important to them. The mantra that life is more than work may have more resonance than ever before. We all know how hard it is to attract and retain good people. That is another element that might trigger change. So, when talking to owners, they realise that a business cannot continue as is. The status quo is not sustainable. There needs to be a change, but what that is not clear. So something needs to happen. And I very much hope that at the end of today's session, we're able to give you some tips so that you might be able to be better prepared if any of this applies to you and your business. In this session, we're joined by 3 contributors who've all had a role to play in supporting business owners in these decisions and assessing the options. By way of introduction, they are Wendy Hart. Wendy recently joined the HMT team from Grant Thornton, where she'd been a corporate finance partner and key member of the firm's technology practice for 22 years. Wendy brings a wealth of experience in advising technology entrepreneurs and investors. During 2020, closed technology transactions with a total value of almost 200 million. Pretty impressive stuff. This was in relation to software services and life science transactions. HMT is a long-established, successful boutique corporate finance house operated across London, Thames Valley and the South. We're also joined by James Whittaker. James works within the corporate finance team at Hazlewoods and has a particular interest in businesses with a tech focus. Having qualified as a chartered accountant in 2011, James spent most of his career working with and briefly for innovative businesses. James also sits on the board of Synam, a non-profit organisation bringing together the thriving technology network in Cheltenham and further afield. I'd also introduce Matt Morris. Matt is a manager at Horizon Capital, been with the team for 6 years. Matt's responsible for sourcing and executing both new investments and strategic add-on acquisitions across Horizon's key sectors of software, technology, data, and business services. Matt also sits on the board as a non-executive director of a number of their portfolio companies. He's very much acting in the short phase. Horizon Capital, by way of background, is a private equity investor focusing on high-growth technology and business services companies. Horizon has 14 portfolio companies. In the past 12 months, this portfolio has acquired more than 35 add-on acquisitions, both across the UK and internationally. Separately, Charlie White has been through this process, done it, and it's emerged out of the other side. He and I will have a separate discussion at the end of this session, focused on the perspective of the seller. Firstly, most importantly, I want to thank each of you for giving up your valuable time and contributing today. We really do appreciate it. My name is Tim Ward. I'm a corporate partner heading up the Cheltenham corporate team at HCR. And I spend my time working with businesses and owners who decided to do something and will be chairing today's session. Much of my work in recent years has been in the technology sector. Okay, now to set the scene, I suggest that we launch into the discussion phase of it and hear from the panelists. I think I've said enough. So James, can I pose the first question to you? I mean, what do you feel are the main motivations and reasons you see for technology businesses seeking to undertake a transaction?
Yeah, hi Tim, hi everyone. Well, I think firstly, entrepreneurs by their nature constantly want to advance and develop and improve, and often I think they find themselves getting to perhaps a ceiling in their business. They may have developed something or some sort of market, and I think that can often trigger a transaction or some sort of event. And that's probably where they need some external help. And those sorts of options might be funding for growth, perhaps getting an investor in who has expertise in a certain sector or a certain new market. I think some owners perhaps have worked so hard they find they want a partial exit, a bit of a cash out. They need to see something now, perhaps. So there's a variety of reasons, but I think most of the reasons are to continuing developing, but to unblock the ceiling they perhaps reached. I think the other side of it then is what the reasons for the investors to force a transaction, and those need to be considered as well. Yeah, and I think often you find if you've got sort of a private equity transaction, it's typically the bolt-on businesses. Looking to perhaps do buy and build flat platforms, which are a very common terminology that's being used day to day, or for trade to advance a technology, or to bring in technology. Tech-enabled businesses at the moment are very attractive, to perhaps bring forward a current business where they're stuck. So I think ceilings is probably where I'm kind of coming from in that angle. What's the main motivation to breach a ceiling?
Wendy, have you heard of any unusual reasons why somebody might want to undertake a transaction? Because we're talking about change here, moving from the status quo. I remember meeting a client who told me that basically they felt they're going to lose all their customers and wanted to bury the skeletons pretty quickly. So have you ever heard of that, Marie, the main motivation?
Not that particular one, no. But I think though on that point that it is often the case that entrepreneurs don't know what is possible necessarily. So one of the things that's interesting is when you sit down with an entrepreneur and they kind of start having a conversation with you about a trade exit, for example, because they know about trade exits, and then you start talking to them about what about private equity, what about partial exit, what about an EOT, what about debt funded solution, and it's language and an environment that's completely unfamiliar to somebody unless they happen to have done it before. So I think I think oftentimes it's for the entrepreneur understanding what the art of the possible is, genuinely what the art of the possible is for them and their business, and helping them to make a rational decision. Undoubtedly, there are people out there who think, lots of people out there who think their business is worth far more than it actually is, and that a transaction is possible, which actually isn't. So I do meet lunatics, but they tend to be at that end of the kind of spectrum. If somebody offers me 50 million for my business, I'll take it. And they're not going to do that. Yeah.
And I mean, this links into the sort of second point that I was going to raise in terms of the initial sort of scoping meeting. What are the key fundamentals that need to be in place to make it work? I suppose for a cyber business, a more broadly technology-based enterprise, because Wendy, you've been involved in the technology sector for a number of years. What would you say are the sort of top three things that need to be there?
It's a really good question and quite a broad one, I guess. And sort of there's fundamentals that need to be in place for any business to transact, really. And I guess top of the list is probably really clear financial data. And any business is going to find it really difficult to either scope or certainly to conclude a transaction unless they have access to data. And I think in the case of technology businesses, that is a really clear analysis of where their revenue is coming from, how much of it is recurring, how much of it is repeatable, how much of it is project-based, a really clear understanding of where the value is in the revenue. So that is a fundamental. I think the other thing is to very clearly be able to articulate what the value proposition is, where the business fits in the market, where it is going to fit into the market, because it is undeniably the case that the technology world moves very quickly, and a business proposition which worked 2 years ago may not work in 2 years' time. So a really clear articulation of direction of travel and if you like, USP, proposition, differentiation, whatever you want to use in terms of describing it. And then I guess the third point is probably enough management going forward. So, that might be a different level of capability depending on whether you're trying to do a private equity transaction where you do need some kind of a sort of strategic solution for the business, or a trade deal where perhaps just operational management that knows what it's doing and has the customer relationships will suffice. But in either case, it will not work for the guy who wants to sell it to still be fundamental to it at the point that he wants to walk away. So those are probably the three things that I'd point to in a first meeting.
And bringing Matt into the conversation, I mean, in terms of the businesses that you look at, what proportion of those would you say are just not ready for the type of investment that you wish to make and the vision that you have at Horizon for those businesses to develop? And separately, I'd ask a question about how do you get to hear about them? I mean, who do you get? Wendy and her team and James and his team, do they get their black book out and just ring you up and say, I've got this great business, and they're the sales pitch, if you like? But how do you get to hear about these people? Do you actually approach some people direct?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because we are sector specialist investors, so into tech and business services. So we tend not to rely on Wendy and people giving us IMs all the time. So we do a lot of our own origination, and through that we speak to kind of many businesses in different sizes, different scale, different kind of shape, and how ready they are for a potential transaction. Often, our original approach will pique their interest in doing something. So you go from being completely unprepared to let's explore this. And often founder-owned and run businesses can be underinvested from a data and an information point of view. And that's not a criticism. It's just when you're running your own business, you've got other things to think about rather than an acquirer having all the information that they need at that point in time. And we have seen fairly large businesses, to be fair, in the technology market who run their business solely on Excel spreadsheets or without monthly management accounts, for example. And that clearly is not an ideal position to be in for a sale process. But I think there is always a way forward. Processes may take longer as understanding the business takes longer if the data isn't there. But a kind of a key part of our initial work and the initial diligence we do, or we get to a position, where we're comfortable with that level of data. And that might be working with somebody like a Wendy and or a buy-side advisor in order to support them to get to that position. But, to enable a quick transaction, the information, how available it is, how ready that is, it's going to definitely impact the speed that as an investor we can get comfortable to make an investment. And if a business was to come to us from someone like a Wendy or an HMT, then we would definitely expect that information to be of good quality at that point. It's mainly the direct origination where you find that sometimes they need a little bit of hand holding to get to the level of granularity of data that we need.
I think often my experience is, because Billy, transactions only work once the financials are there, but there's that period in time in which what they think is appropriate is not actually appropriate, and then it needs to be remodeled, if you like, for the buy side, if you like, to understand it. And that obviously sometimes creates frustration because they don't understand why they've got to do it, because it's all in my head anyway, and surely it's obvious that we make the money this way. And then the separate area, just talking about sort of the key fundamentals I see from a legal perspective is, if you're a technology business, how did you create that IP on which that business works. It's surprising number of people really haven't grasped that concept, even though they run IT businesses, that they've got software engineers in India and they've never got a document signed with those people, and open source software, and how do you wrap that up into a way in which, unfortunately, a buy-side set of lawyers and advisors will crawl over that and ensure that actually that company has a right to use that IP, owns it, fundamentally it's there, and it's packaged in such a way that whoever the buyer is can then presumably sell that on or use it and exploit it in the way they want. Has anybody seen businesses where that just is quite clearly not there and it creates issues? James, have you seen that?
Yeah, I have. Where as you say, where they've delegated software development to a third party, and then there is no clear documentation. Either there is no clear documentation, full stop, and I've certainly seen that, and we've had to produce the documentation during the course of the process, or where the documentation and probably the ownership sits with the third party, and therefore a side deal has to be done with the third party in order to bring it into the right place. We've got one of those at the moment, actually. So it's not that unusual.
And at that point, you discover that your best mate is your software developer who you thought was your guy you go down the pub with, and he's sign whatever he wants. He's not going to be a problem. Suddenly decides that he wants a few million quid and he's not going to sign anything at all. And
if you're asking, there must be a reason why you're asking, and therefore where's the money? Yeah, absolutely.
I think I'd add to that, to Wendy's point exactly. I've seen the same about software ownership and IP. Founders' businesses, they're babies. There's nothing they can't do wrong, but often they have done wrong, because once upon a time there was nothing with the business, and they perhaps did something perhaps a little bit complicated with a group reorganisation or whatever. Anything corporate structure always creates an issue, and I think knowing those in advance of any discussion, trying to get those skeletons out or perhaps sorted is a key point, whether it be IP ownership or sometimes even where the shares are held. I've had things like that, pop up, and those are conversations that can be quite painful in an inappropriate point in time. So I think along with the scoping questions, it should also be making sure that everything's robust behind it. So it shouldn't be a matter of going to market tomorrow. I'd almost hate that I've had an offer of 20 million yesterday. You almost want to get them ready for sale first, so that all those issues are kind of dealt with, because invariably there will be some issues that need to get sorted out. And obviously that's where we get involved and have some fun. Yeah,
and sometimes I think we find ourselves as a bit like marriage guidance counsellors, are trying to get people to work together, because I've also found cases in which a management team, you're told are all aligned to an exit or the vision, if you like, but you've got one person who, if it's maybe dogmatic, a clear leader, and the others, when it actually gets to making the decision to change, it only then becomes apparent that they don't actually all have the same vision, even to the extent of somebody wanting to sell and somebody not wanting to sell, if you like, and let alone what terms you do sell it. And that sometimes needs to be badged in a particular case. And if you're midway through a transaction, particularly if you've got the lawyers involved, because we're into the late stage of transaction, that is really unhelpful, isn't it? And maybe, Matt, if you could just lead off on maybe this particular area, which is what makes a company particularly attractive and what key factors contribute to that?
Yeah, so as we've kind of discussed just now, obviously the financial profile of a business for us is going to be quite important, and be that healthy margins, historical organic growth profile, diversified, sticky customer base, cash generative, all of that. But that's almost a kind of a hygiene factor for a lot of the stuff that we do. I think other important and kind of softer things will be around the team. That always comes up as really important. So how backable are the team? And we are specialist buy and build investors, so we're always looking for ambitious management teams that are hungry for that acquisitive growth journey, really, where we know that what we can bring to the table is really going to accelerate the kind of plans that are already there, and we feel like it's a real partnership, and we can help the kind of management accelerate on the journey that they're on. And I think Wendy mentioned it earlier as well, a business that has potential, really. And what I mean by that is that, especially for technology businesses, you've got a future roadmap of where you want to go and what you want to do. Be it, I want to acquire XYZ, or I want to build this kind of module for my software and sell it to these people, or, you know, I need to hire 10 more salespeople in this country, something that shows us that there's really, you know, a really good roadmap and potential for the business to grow. So that often goes hand in hand with an ambitious management team, because they've usually got that plan. And if the, you know, the kind of hygiene factor of the financials stack up there in a growing market, which all of these technology businesses seem to be in at the moment, you know, that's a really good combination for what we're looking for.
And I've seen deals, particularly in the private equity side, where as part of that transaction, and we come back to a point, I think, James, you picked up on it, where maybe the business has outgrown the individual skills of the founder, and therefore, as part of that, you've got a management team that want to step up to the plate and then have an increased role in the ownership and management of that business. The original founder will effectively step back, either a consultancy role or in terms of the chair as chairperson, or giving them something that makes them think they're doing something, but actually nobody wants them to be around whatsoever from the point of closing. And you've also then brought in a new managing director and incentivise them from the private equity side with equity and sort of incentive, etc. And James, do you have people that you have found that have been introduced to a business and they've got to know the founders, and actually that enables a transaction to occur? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It can sometimes lead to an odd dynamic because they're given the baby to drive. But as long as that individual's got the right skill set, then it works for both parties. And obviously that can be with the founder taking a complete sale, you know, giving it. I think it's called it's called a bimbo, isn't it? A buy-in, management, buy-out. Yeah. And we're seeing more and more of those, which are supported by PE. Whether it's by, you know, a friend of the founder, I've not always seen that turn out to be a pleasant experience, but it's certainly. It's certainly increasing in the type of transactions that are going out there, but even non-connected to the founder, we're seeing people, you know, management teams being brought in to take this business forward. Perhaps someone who's been through a process before and wants to get his teeth stuck into something new. Perfect opportunity.
Yeah, I remember doing one transaction where they did bring the founder brought in the new managing director, let's say 12 months, 18 months, because I think he'd probably been through the process. The corporate finance advisor says, you need to actually have somebody other than yourself running this business. So brought this guy in, bedded down, and within 12 months of the guy joining, of course, as part of that role, he decided to make some changes. He wanted to change how the business was run. He had that vision and wanted to do a lot of things that the founder just wasn't happy to do. So at that point, the two of them were not talking to each other. And there was a fair bit of sort of both sets of advisors trying to get the guys to actually close the deal, even though everybody had started from a common ground. And it was just like personal sort of animosity. The owner felt that he wasn't being valued and his input wasn't required. And it was a bit of, if you like, baggage and not respected. And that just, so it comes back to a lot of this is down to those kind of personal relationships and understanding how each person is valued and what their core objectives are and aspirations. Does that make sense? It's a bit of that kind of soft sell.
What is clear whenever I'm talking with business owners is that the value needs to be in the business and not the founder. It's quite that's a big thing. You know, depending on the transaction type, it's even more important. If you're looking for a full exit and the business is the founder, you're not going to get any value because that founder wants to leave, and if he leaves, then most of the business is kind of in his head. So, founders need to have a well-supported management team beneath them. Certainly shouldn't be thumbing invoices or banking checks. And investors almost want to see, they certainly want to see, in fact, an appropriate management team beneath the founder or founders. Because they want to invest in that. They want to make sure there's good governance in place. And often businesses that are seeking a sizable transaction require that. I think Matt mentioned that, he's seen certain targets where they've reported financial results on Excel. It happens. And you think, wow, that's not going to happen post-completion. So, that's got to be taken into consideration for the value, and the business culture will change. So you want to try and bring that change of culture in before any transaction happens, to make sure that there's no real, the rug or carpet being pulled underneath the individuals involved, because those individuals are pretty key to the business value itself. I think also, just to kind of go back onto that, I think the entrepreneurs are, they can be very interesting people in their approach to running businesses, and they often find it difficult to entrust their business with middle management, because they want to find people that share the same drive and enthusiasm as themselves, which can often be a challenge if management see it as a job and not perhaps a career, or perhaps incentivized appropriately behind that. So, incentivizing management towards a goal, a tangible goal, that perhaps some exit event in the future. And I think you've mentioned previously about share options, perhaps, but ensuring that the management team are kind of motivated and therefore probably incentivized is key to basically, getting investors to believe that they're all on board as well.
Yeah, I think I'll echo that, because if you've got a strong business that's just owned by a couple of shareholders and there's a management team and they don't have an option scheme in place, I think my takeaway from that is there's a less open attitude on the part of that owner to share and to incentivize people going forward. Whereas if you've actually introduced an option scheme and you've structured something in a particular way, you are open to that stage that we'll all talk about, which is a transaction, whatever that transaction is going to look like. And it's an option scheme, and what we call EMI, and there's some technical terminology around that, is frankly a no-brainer, I think, for any owner, because you can then structure it in a way in which they can only exercise the options if there's exit. It has to be of a particular figure if you want that. If somebody decides to walk out the door, they lose their options. But if you're in on the journey and you participate, you deliver on it, you get a slice of the action. And in many cases, that incentivizes that management team to then be part of a private equity transaction, or to invest in that bimbo arrangement you talked about by management, James. So what proportion, Matt, do you see of technology business whereby the management team that you want to incentivize do have a slice of equity, be it in options or growth shares, etc.?
Yeah, I think for the deals that we've been looking at over the last 12 months or so, both platform and add-on, it's very common for there to be some kind of EMI scheme or share option scheme in place where the founder or founders have got the majority, and then the more important key managers below that have been cut in. And we actually quite like that scenario as an investor, because, where there are key management, not just the founder, those key management will then have the option to roll value into Newco. Some of the value that they've got through that, it keeps everyone with skin in the game and alignment as well, in addition to any kind of sweet equity or additional kind of equity incentivization. So we quite like that. We like that if the founder, which is often the case, is wanting to de-risk significantly or step back from the business, making sure that the management team beneath that have got a significant chunk of that equity is, it's a positive from when we're looking at a kind of a cap structure and the shareholding of a business. So being involved in the equity alongside us then usually on the same terms, which is separate to the suite, means that we're all aligned as well. We are, we're all kind of chasing the same success together on the same terms, and that drives the right longer term behaviours as well, where people have got a 3, 4, 5 year vision in their mind as opposed to a short term bonus goal or something similar. So we like that dynamic, and we do see it quite a lot. And I suppose it's commonplace where you have succession issues within these kind of businesses.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a deal that we did, and this was one where the owner didn't have any option schemes, and it was a PE house buying it, and the PE house sort of said, well, let's look at it realistically, and it was a Christmas transaction, and they said, well, the owners, and it was a husband and wife team basically, were going to walk away with potentially, let's say, £20 million, and the key management that the private equity team were going to inherit, if you like, to drive the business forward, some of which had some sweet equity, would get nothing out of that transaction at all. And they worked out quite late into the process, well, we're going to go in the 1st of January, and the owners have walked away with 20 million quid, and we're going to have quite a demotivated management team that we're going to have to motivate, and they're going to be really a bit peed off that obviously they've helped to drive that value, and yet they haven't got a slice of it. So they said to the owner, frankly, you've got to pay some bonuses. And the bonuses cannot be less than this. So he had to pay out maybe £500,000 worth of bonuses to that management team to get them aligned going forward. And of course, that cost him double that amount because of the tax.
Yeah.
And it was pointed out you could have given them £500,000 for an EMI option scheme, and it would cost you £500,000 basically. So I think that is a key reason whenever I speak to people is also say, well, really do think about motivating your management team at an early stage, and you can always pull the rug away if they're not working, because you structure the EMI option in the right way with the right kind of messages and values and long-term deliverability.
I think the other thing to say about EMI schemes is that I think in all the years that they've been around, they are the single thing that causes hiccups in deals the most. Badly implemented EMI schemes or rules that haven't been kept up to date, or it's probably the single biggest tax problem in deal terms, and that's almost worse than not having one in the first place, because option holders think they've got options, and then it turns out they haven't got valid options, and they are going to have to pay income tax rates on what they're going to get, and I've lost count of the number of deals that's been an issue in. If you're going to do it properly.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think on most of the deals we've seen in the last 12 months, the EMI scheme has either not been done correctly, or, like you say, tax issues arise. And what is a real pain is when that slows down the deal as well, and because it's a really important point. And for it not to have been implemented properly, it takes time to work through. So I completely agree that we see that in every deal, pretty much every deal.
It's amazing how I wonder how many of them actually get done right. I have to say, the number that get done wrong. Yeah.
It's an interesting point though, because I mentioned this earlier, is that where you've got transactions and shares, more often than not, they've not been done properly, and there's been some hiccup. And I completely echo your points. I had one last year. They had an EMI option scheme, and they had an approved valuation with HMRC, but then they issued options every year. They didn't go back and get the new valuation. Therefore, they just thought the valuation was that was agreed, but the value of the business kept going up, and therefore what you're telling staff or those option holders is that they've got value, but actually the reality is some of that's going to be subject to PAYE, and these conversations need to be dealt with appropriately. I think also on the EMI, the one thing that I've come across in the past is that they're a great tool to not only incentivize management, but to certainly in early phase businesses to perhaps remunerate management. But I've had certain cases whereby staff haven't really believed in the exit event, and therefore they've just really it's been kind of a piece of paper that's worthless. So an EMI option scheme doesn't get implemented 5 minutes before a transaction. It needs to be implemented 3, 4, 5 years before a transaction. And they've really got to buy into that, that founder actually having an exit event, whether that's a sale or there's a performance trigger in it. So I think it's critical that in order to motivate management with an EMI scheme, they really buy into your journey. Otherwise, they just won't believe in it.
No, that's useful. So if we just move the conversation on, let's say we've established and we've met and we've engaged with a business that has the fundamental sort of potential to undertake a transaction, i.e. it's making money and we know how it's making money. It's a business that actually other people are interested in. And separately, I guess there's a strong management team and they're aligned as to how we're moving forward. Think about the audience to be watching this. What options are available to an owner embarking on this process, and how do you educate, I guess, and evaluate which option is probably the more appropriate one than the other? Trade sale, private equity transaction, bimbo, etc. Wendy, have you got any thoughts as to how, let's say, an owner comes in and doesn't have a view, they just want to do something, how you lead them down a particular route?
Yeah, well, I think on the contrary, most clients that we start engaging with think they know exactly what the answer is, and in many cases it's as narrow as we want to sell and we think these guys will buy us. So that quite often, or to be fair, they've had an approach from a particular acquirer, and that's what triggers the thought process, and that's what triggers the conversation. I think what usually ends up happening at the very least, and I think this is usually the right answer, is that it is sensible for them to test at least a combination of trade and private equity acquirers, just to see which gives them the best option. And it won't be comparing apples and apples, it'll be comparing apples, pears, blueberries and raspberries, but at least then you've got a range of options, usually from a fairly vanilla trade deal, probably with some element of earn-out in it, through to a kind of conventional majority private equity deal, perhaps with some kind of variations of that in the middle. And usually for a business which is, as you just described, i.e. it's a nice, attractive, transactable business, something coming out of a dual track trade and private equity process will hit the buttons. Clients usually know whether they want to carry on working or not to carry on working, and that coupled with the conversation we've already had about adequacy of succession is a big driver. If you haven't got a management solution, basically you can't really go to private equity for a private equity deal unless it's a bolt-on type scenario, which is really trade anyway. So sometimes it kind of takes itself down a path because some of the options are by definition closed. But if somebody's done their prep right and they've thought about it and they've created succession and they've ticked all of the boxes that we would usually want them to be ticking, then it comes down to a straight fight between trade and private equity. And interestingly, over the last few years, private equity have typically outgunned trade in terms of valuation. So lots of clients who started off thinking this will go to trade, this will go to these guys over there because it's a perfect fit, that isn't actually what's ended up happening. Apart from that, the other kind of deal structures, if I'm honest, tend to happen where that isn't an option. And where that isn't an option, it's usually because the business isn't quite big enough, isn't quite exciting enough, hasn't quite got the right sort of management team. And then you end up with sort of, whether it's a debt funded buyout or a vendor plus debt funded buyout or an EOT or something like that. But those in my world tend to be second choices because they don't typically yield such good valuations. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And when you talk about an EOT, I assume we talk about employee ownership trust structure.
Yes, there's been a wave of them because what they do allow vendors to do is take advantage of the current capital gains tax regime without having to find an external third party to do the deal with. Now, I have a personal view that some of those are storing up a problem for later, because that there is no clear owner who's driving everything once you've got an EOT ownership structure. But they certainly have ticked the box for a number of businesses that were either cash rich and wanted to cash in capital gains tax rates now, or don't have another option. So it's an interesting structure which has had a bit of a kind of flurry of activity lately.
Yeah, and also I think, sorry, James, you carry on, because we've done you and I have done a couple, haven't we? So, but
yeah,
what's your insight on
we
it?
have. The EOT, as you say, is good if you've got cash in the business, but most EOTs are based on deferred consideration. And I think when you've got a tech business, if you want to exit, then you're basically you really are showing whether you believe your management team. That's often a real test here, because they can be sort of 5, 10. I've seen up to 15-year deferred terms on an EOT before.
I actually haven't seen one done on a fast growth tech business, to be honest, because I think there are better options for a fast growth tech business.
Yeah, I often find that they have. That's a last route, isn't it? Often the EAT, they can't quite get a trade sale or a PE sale. Mind you, most of the private equity sales that I've done are actually it's a platform. It's a sale to a platform company, which is PE backed, and they're doing a buy and build. So it's a bit of a mixture of the two, isn't it? It's a trade sale, but it's backed by the private equity investors.
And that tends to be quite different in character, doesn't it, to a direct investment sort of first or platform private equity deal. Yeah,
and you often see lots of I think we mentioned it before, equity rollover. Seeing lots of that in those types of transactions, because it makes it affordable for the buyer as well. But it also means that you're getting value now, but you're also going to get value in the future at an enhanced rate. So they're actually quite an interesting way and mechanism of how to construct a transaction.
And if you're doing, let's say, this hybrid where it is a private equity, but it's a bolt-on, I mean, clearly there's one element of a private equity deal in which you're negotiating the first acquisition, and you've got your investment documentation, you've got your sweet equity. It's just for that bespoke business, if that makes sense. So you're putting all that together, and then you've got your bolt-on. In that respect, then you've got just some of the deals that you've done. You've then got to work out how that individual business and that management team fit into your private equity mothership, if you like, that you've bolted it onto. And of course, valuation and incentivizing and building a team, if you like, they're going to work together. Does that create extra complexities, and how do you manage some of that?
I mean, it can do, but I think the benefit of a PE-backed trade deal, see, as I said, we do a number of bolt-ons each year in the tech space. And because of that, I think the PE model means we can be pretty flexible with how we structure things. So, we can act like a trade buyer. We can be 100% cash out, cash from day one and you're done. Or we can, actually sometimes hardly any cash on day one. You can roll a chunk, there's a sweet equity pot available, or or an earn-out structure or deferred consideration or whatever it might be. So I think we structured deals in a number of different ways, and it gives that optionality really, where you're getting the trade sale. So, you are being acquired by a large business, but we don't have a tried and tested necessarily. It has to be 100% cash out, or, if it's a really people-based business, it has to be a 4-year earn-out that turn people off. It's not a black and white, I think, as some traditional trade sales would be. So it gives that kind of optionality to the shareholders, I think.
Yeah. And for a tech business, the buyers out there from a trade perspective, particularly if it's a young growing business that doesn't have a footprint, if you like, in terms of maybe the bricks and mortar and a long established pedigree, is it more of a risk for a trade buyer than a private equity deal? Or it needs to be a trade buyer that is sort of quite nimble, isn't it? Has that kind of approach to a core technology business rather than somebody just adding on a technology business to its existing operations and hope that it's going to work, because unless you are a technology business, it doesn't actually, you don't have those kind of shared alignments and values.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think even technology businesses, right, it's all about culture and how it all fits together. So what is often a better option for vendors selling to some PE-backed trade, which are potentially smaller and more agile and nimble than a large, maybe an SI or a big trade acquirer, is we can often help. Like I think James mentioned earlier, these are often babies for the founders, and it's quite an emotional sale. So selling your business where you know that the brand is going to go, you know, you're not sure what's going to happen to the people or the legacy that you've built up, we can offer slightly different structures to that to help protect some of the more emotional side of things that are important to vendors and shareholders, you know, while still getting the benefit of what is ultimately a trade sale.
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing a deal which was effectively a cyber business. Actually, they sold to a certain European aircraft manufacturer that we all know, and the guy sold his business for what, 5-6 million, and turned up on the first day to Cardiff to find out who he was reporting to, and the guy sort of said to him, well, you thought you were talking to X, now he's no longer with us, he's moved to another team, etc. I've looked after you, I don't know why we bought you and what you're going to do here. So that's not the best way of starting it, and it's that kind of trade. It seemed a good idea to somebody, but it wasn't their core activity, and where's it going to sit?
And that was a point I was going to make, actually, because I think that is a way in which the market has changed over the last few years. I see what I see from trade. I mean, I think this has always been true for private equity, that they kind of pretty much know what they want, and if it's not what they want, they won't look at it. But trade have become increasingly like that, in the sense that, you know, they're not opportunistic anymore. So you might put something in front of them, and I have, that's, you know, beautiful and a really good fit. But it's not, if it's not what's on their M&A agenda, if it's not the gap they're looking to fill at the moment, if it's not what they've been mandated to look for as a corporate M&A team, then the answer will be a very clear no. And so that kind of understanding of almost who's looking for what and what are the gaps that, and you know, it tends to be a bit like a flock of sheep, in the sense that quite often, forgive me, Matt, private equity are all looking for the same thing at the same time, and increasingly that's true for trade as well. Then that's a really important thing, I think, for potential or would-be vendors to understand what that sort of landscape looks like, where are the high multiples being paid and why, and it tends to be to do with, you know, almost like strategic jigsaw puzzles and filling in the gaps. And if you happen to have a really nice business that isn't anybody's last jigsaw puzzle piece, you might find a transaction really difficult to consummate, even though actually you've done everything else right. So it's quite an interesting characteristic of the market, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, this leads on to, I suppose, another point about private equity, and probably one from Matt. And I read, I think it was the Times last week or the week before, private equity is obviously very active, and I think they had a big section about buying up various companies in the UK. I've seen a number of deals in the cyber sector. And I guess to a man who's built up his business, don't take this from way, Matt, but private equity doesn't always have the best reputation. And press probably doesn't help, because there's one or two bad cases, if you like, but that's probably the business rather than actually the model itself. And so I was just going to sort of ask you really, what are your views on how it can work for an entrepreneur, and what are the bear traps to avoid from their perspective? Yeah,
I mean, picking up on a number of points, PE does suffer quite a negative media kind of attention, and there's been a lot of bad press surrounding, you know, when there's high profile stuff in the news. So the Morrison's deal, you get a lot of follow-on articles about nasty PE. But I think at our level, where we invest, we are kind of lower mid-market, and we're all growth investors really, rather than financial engineers. So it's not really about restructuring and cost out, but it's, you know, the creation of new opportunities, the creation of larger businesses through investment into organic growth, into robust business systems and processes, and complementary acquisitions, as we've mentioned. So what is a good option? I think why private equity is a good option for entrepreneurs who have reached this kind of crossroads and this ceiling that we spoke about earlier. It's an opportunity. You get to that crossroads, whether you're thinking, do you double down investing your own capital in order to break through that ceiling and kick on, and all the risk that is associated with that? Whereas private equity offers you the perfect opportunity to de-risk your own personal portfolio, but then get access to external capital to help you accelerate that growth, and also retain the identity and culture of the business, as I touched upon earlier. So you can, that which wouldn't really be achievable through a 100% trade sale. So it gives you the opportunity to grow and cash out. It's a really nice mix of both. And I think the main piece of advice I would give to entrepreneurs in terms of partnering with private equity is who you partner with is what really matters. I mean, cash is a commodity, yeah, but the flavor of investor that you're partnering with on a 3, 4, 5 year journey is a really important factor. Ensuring you've done your referencing on your investor and knowing the style that you're going to be comfortable with over a long period. So, a lot of the documents I receive from Wendy have a bottom left to top right line, and it's not always quite like that over the 3 to 4, 5 year period with private equity. So, you have to be comfortable that the people that you're going on that journey with are people that you're going to be able to work with and kind of get along with, not just in the like the good times, but also the more challenging times as well. So referencing who you're going to work with, having a sector specific investor on board is really helpful for that, because they've been there, worked in businesses with similar challenges, and also have that broader network where you can bring in chairman, non-execs, or other people you've worked with before. So I would definitely, if people are considering private equity as a route, really do your homework on who you're kind of getting into bed with, really.
And James and Wendy, from your side, obviously, in many cases, you're both acting on a sales mandate, aren't you? And that individual is having a conversation, and you're sort of proposing potentially different suitors, if you like. What's your sort of key messages? We've heard Matt's perspective, and from a sales side, if you like, for somebody who doesn't actually understand that kind of model in that business.
Yeah, well, and that is. I mean, you're absolutely right, Matt. Everybody knows a man down the pub who's been done over by private equity. It's kind of, I spent most of my life trying to rehabilitate private equity in the minds of the mid-market, and I think I genuinely think it's a real shame, because I obviously know of a handful of horror stories, but actually, when you even dig into those horror stories, there's usually a damn good reason why what happened. I think on the whole, people who partner with private equity do very nicely out of it, and better than they probably would have done on their own. So I am an advocate of private equity. I think as well as the capital, it brings professionalism and structure and objectivity to a business, and I think it can be incredibly helpful. And I think a lot of the it is about making sure people understand what is going to be true. I mean, when I was relatively early in my career, I remember very vividly having conversations with a client about a private equity deal and introducing him to a couple of kind of, very personable private equity guys who he really liked. As soon as he got the term sheet, he literally went, well, I thought we were friends, and we're not friends. Look at this term sheet, veto rights, swamping rights. It's about trying to contextualize that and say, A, you'll have had some cash out, and therefore you are de-risked. This is all about risk reward. This is all about risk allocation. This is all about flushing things out and understanding the nature of the deal that you are looking to do. And I think if you do that, and people understand that before the term sheet lands, and then on the whole, it works okay. I mean, obviously you have the odd sort of shebang about stuff, but I think it's when people just don't understand the fundamental nature of the relationship between entrepreneur and private equity that it gets very, very difficult. So usually people haven't been advised properly if you get to that point, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo that. I mean, I'll probably get shot by my fellow corporate partners, but I'd say, in my experience, it does matter what the documents say, but not hugely.
Well, they all say the same thing mostly. Yeah.
Yeah, they all say the same thing. If you get in bed with somebody, it will have the same kind of core principles. Let's not get hung up about that. What you ought to get hung up about is probably, are you comfortable with who you actually sort of getting into bed with and having this future relationship with? Have you spent the time? And strikes me when I get involved from a legal documentation negotiation perspective, which is obviously at the end of the process fundamentally, the number of people still have not actually gone out for dinner, had a pint with that individual, spent their time, maybe talked to some of their portfolio businesses, and actually engage on a personal level and what makes that individual, you as a, if you like, non-executive director, some of your portfolio companies, what makes you tick as an individual, what are your values, what are your aspirations? And I say you should spend less time talking to me about a particular clause in the agreement because it's not going to change hugely, and I can give you some reassurance about it, and more time actually just going out and spending that time with somebody.
Yeah, I think the other thing is about honesty. So, you know, I think to Matt's point, you know, entrepreneurs really don't have anything to fear from the odd blip that isn't their fault and is a market or a mistake, or it happens on the way through and nobody could see it coming. I think, you know, where it goes really wrong, it does tend to be a breach of trust situation. Either something, you know, was not clear in diligence, or, you know, something strategic had been mooted and then turned out not to be possible. Or I think, you know, trust and honesty are fundamental to that relationship. It's a bit like a kind of relatively short marriage, isn't it? You're kind of locked together, and you might as well be honest with the other guy about what could go wrong. And I think because having done that, you can be a lot more confident that if it does then go wrong, everybody had thought about it, and nobody's going to go, well, where the hell did that come from? So I think that's important too.
I agree with that thing. It's really important. The honesty thing is so important because, like Wendy said, if something happens and it's nobody's fault, you work together to get over it. If you feel like someone's been trying to pull the wool over your eyes and, you know, actually we knew about this 3 months ago, but we didn't mention it and now it's an issue, that's when you feel betrayed, really, or, you know, or misled, I think is probably a bit.
Or what else is there? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you almost lose that integrity of, okay, if this is wrong, what else is wrong? So completely agree. It's all about being open, transparent, and knowing what you're getting into.
Cultural fit, isn't it? It comes down to can we work with these guys going forward? Because as you mentioned, the term sheet, sometimes they can be a little bit daunted by, I've got an earn out, a 2-year earn out or deferred consideration, what have you. And I'm never going to see this because it's private equity. But I think the reality is they need to be kind of they need to get on board with the fact that they want this to work just as much as you do. They're incentivized to make it, or they want to pay out. So it's kind of bridging that gap and kind of, you know, educating it. Is a word I don't like to use, but it is the word, really, isn't it? Explaining that this is the reason why it's structured like that. And I've had instances in the past when you go to market and it's a competitive process, and, you know, there's been on a buyer list, they've just said we won't sell to them, and if that's fine, well, you take them off the list then, and you don't go down the process with them, because if you're going to get an offer and you're never going to sell to them, then let's not waste everyone's time. I think that's also, everyone needs to be honest with themselves in the process and kind of do their own due diligence in that cultural fit, and make sure that if you're going to go down, you know, a 3 or 4 buyer list route, that you know, you can see yourself with them in the future, because most transactions are vendors got to stay on for a period of time. Almost all that I've seen recently in the last few years are that way. So cultural fit is key.
Yeah, and I mean, just finishing this section, I think one of the areas that I've seen, and echoing what Matt was saying, where, let's say, the numbers have become softer, or there's a trend that's less welcome to the owner, and they might want to sort of try paint it as a temporary thing, or there's some exceptional circumstance, and yet somebody's actually kicking the tires, thinking, no, we are into a stage in which maybe it is not that upward trajectory. We just need to, and therefore the value you originally expected isn't maybe achievable. What I've seen from private equity deals I've been involved in is that there is actually a willingness to restructure it. It might mean that there is an element of deferred that's linked to some kind of performance, but nobody walks away. It's actually that openness, and it makes you as a owner selling able to sort of sleep and say, well, I told you that there was this softening, and therefore maybe my consideration is affected by whatever is happening in the wider market. And it just makes the whole deal and that relationship going forward so much better, isn't it, for everybody?
Yeah.
I think Matt mentioned it about the hockey stick growth. And if you want to sell on the hockey stick peak, then do you believe it? Because if you don't, then there's no point in wasting everyone's time, because you won't achieve it, and then invariably you won't get full value for it. So I think it's also kind of, and I think Wendy touched on it at the beginning. Let's understand where the value is, and kind of properly seek kind of the strategy and getting the best value that way.
Just sort of wrapping up, if you like, this section in terms of, and we may have picked up on a lot of this, but what are the main reasons for a transaction failing to proceed or a buyer not being identified? Is there anything that any of you would have to sort of add to what we've already picked up on?
I think in terms of not finding a buyer, it tends to be either lack of scale, or in a market where that's what people are looking for. So I think at the moment you either have to have a very clear differentiated niche, or some very, very valuable IP, or scale. I think to not have any of those things is quite a difficult transaction, and so. If a business is relatively small and relatively undifferentiated, I think it's quite often the case that a buyer is going to be difficult to find. Not impossible, but more luck than one would normally like in a process. So that's why I think it might be hard to find a buyer. In terms of why do processes fail, it tends to be fundamentally lack of momentum. So I would always say to somebody, be really ready to go to market before you go to market. Have your VDR up and running, your virtual data room up and running. Know the answers to all the questions. Have your succession. If you put an EMI scheme in, make sure it's right, and then press the button, because then you're going to be in the driving seat on the way through the transaction. As soon as somebody asks you a question that you have to go away and dibble around for 3 weeks to answer, or you can't answer, then you have at the very least lost momentum. And the more momentum that you lose, the more people go off and start doing other things at the same time, and the more chance there is that something else is going to go wrong. So speed is the friend of deals, and therefore that's what most often goes wrong. One way or another, it just takes too long and things start to go wrong, I think, is how I would characterize it.
We actually acquired a business with the support of Wendy and HMT in March, and the kind of the quality of the data and the like how well put together every single of our questions and diligence questions were enabled us to close that one, pretty quickly within, 8 weeks or so, I think, from kicking off diligence. So that availability of data and basically making sure that it doesn't feel like you're hiding anything. So it might not even be you are hiding anything, but if you can answer the questions really quickly and really well, great, all the data's there, we're really comfortable and we can go. And also, less can go wrong in that period of time because it's only 8 weeks. So if that starts to drag out, trading might come off, and then that might go to some kind of conversation around structure, and people do get deal fatigue at that point. And you can just say, I'm not quite as excited as I was about this, and we're constantly talking about the same thing. So I'd echo that kind of making sure you're ready to go if you want to go really helps.
I always say, and this is a bit mean, but due diligence guys aren't looking to catch people out. They're looking to get the answers to the questions they're asking. If you can give them a tick in the box easily, they're not going to go digging into wormholes. If you can't give them a tick in the box, then they will go digging into wormholes. And A, it takes longer, and B, it's more painful. So if you understand the nature of the beast, it gets easier to kind of tie the thing up in red ribbon and give them exactly what they wanted. I was going to tell you a very brief story though about a deal I did a very long time ago. I was selling a business for 3i, and it was a business that produced synthetic hormones, which are a thing. I didn't know that before. And in the end, I sold it 3 times. I sold it first to an AIM-listed biotech that ended up being subject to a takeover bid in the week before we were supposed to complete. And so they couldn't go ahead because they wanted to do the takeover. Then we sold it to Cadbury Schweppes, weirdly, who, and again, really late in the process, a US lawyer decided there was some kind of reputational risk for Cadbury Schweppes in having something to do with a particular hormone, which had some rather unsavory side effects. Nothing to do with our company, just, in the broader Sunday Times front page thing. So finally, we sold it to Johnson & Johnson, but it literally it was 3 whole transactions. So you never know what's going to go wrong. And another reason for having a really fast process is that it makes it much easier to keep the underbidders there in case you need them.
Yeah, and just echoing what you're saying, Wendy, I mean, we've got a PE deal where effectively the management team and the core owner told us the IP was in a particular place. It isn't. Separately, the operating system doesn't work as it was intended to work. And then he agreed to put in a new system, or that was part of the plan. That was going to take 6 weeks to put in a new system. It's taken 12, 13 weeks. Yep. Then, of course, we want to see that new system's working. We're all back from the summer holiday. It dropped, so we stopped the weekly calls in early June, July time. I was expecting to get the phone call to say we're moving things forward. We're going to pick it up because this is the time we're going to review it. And my clients are sort of saying, well, actually, we're not so sure now. We've got a number of other opportunities we're looking at. And we're not sure if the number's ever going to recover. And we've lost a bit of trust in what he's told us. So we're going to have a sort of session, decide if it's something we want to still do. And that's a product of basically not doing anything for 6 weeks, I think. We've been through a global pandemic. And would anybody disagree with the conclusion that tech businesses are much more attractive than they were? And how important is to have that strong digital footprint? If you don't have that, is that a really key disadvantage for you? James, have you got any comments on that?
I think we all agree that technology, not just technology business, but technology has obviously been fundamental in working through the pandemic. I think what businesses themselves have found through that has perhaps been, the requirement to bolster security, and that's where there's been opportunity on cyber businesses to step up quite a bit, and businesses have been able to, if they haven't already, bolster their cyber credentials, whether that be software transactions, or whatever. So we've seen quite a bit of interest in that. In businesses taking an interest in buying cyber consultancy firms or software firms, certainly just bolt on. I think that's always been quite prevalent around in Cheltenham, but I think it's more and more important now where businesses are seeing that as a pretty crucial part of their own organisation structure. They need cybersecurity. Therefore, the whole market in that has increased. And therefore, businesses are looking to kind of make sure they can offer that. I think bizarrely, I don't know about yourselves, but the pandemic, certainly probably the last year, has been rife for the transactions. It's been exceptionally busy. Unless you're in sort of food and drink or perhaps hospitality, everything's been gone, 60 and 10 times quicker than it would before. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily just software or technology businesses, but perhaps they are leading the pack. But there's lots of activity going on, lots and lots.
Yeah, I mean, just picking up as lawyers, the lawyers get involved in the process quite late in the day, and Wendy and James probably hate it when they have the first conversation with a set of lawyers on both sides of transactions, and their view is, well, they're bound to slow it down, and both frustrate the transaction, but I like to think we try to help out and ease the process. But so we get involved later in the process. We've been incredibly busy, and I guess you as a group will be talking to lots of businesses, lots of prospects, and thinking about what's going to develop. And obviously yesterday we had the tax rises and the change to NI, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I also thought there was announcements when the budget was going to be at some point in October. So historically, over the past 2 years, it's been great for us as lawyers and accountants and corporate finance people, because actually we end up spending huge amounts of time doing work because everybody's terrified of paying more tax. Now, whether that's going to happen this October on the basis is just increase the tax rates, I'm not sure, but I wonder if anybody's phones have started ringing or people are now concerned about that. But what is the general sort of appetite and the sort of deal flow, if you like, that you're both seeing, Wendy and James?
Yeah, I mean, to echo James's point, I think I had a conversation with somebody this morning. I think if you can't do deals at the moment, then you'll never be able to do deals. It's very buoyant. There's the odd deal that's driven by fear of tax rises, but actually most of the entrepreneurs that I work with have actually been quite phlegmatic about that, and they're not prepared to rush something through that isn't the right thing for the sake of potentially saving tax. So that hasn't been quite as much of a driver as it was perhaps when they changed entrepreneurial leave the first time or other occasions. I think actually one of the real drivers is the volume of capital in the market and the almost the necessity for private equity and large trade buyers to find inorganic growth and to identify acquisitions, which is kind of itself driving deal activity and thought processes in a lot of the businesses that we're seeing. I think corporate, it wasn't that long ago that to say your business was on the market was kind of almost, entrepreneurs seem to see it as an admission of failure somehow, that, they didn't want anyone to know.
Yeah.
Whereas now I think it is far more acceptable, far more understood as a kind of just something that you do to see what might happen if something interesting comes out of it. And therefore a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs are building businesses specifically with a view to selling them. And therefore it's happening quicker, and so the business cycles kind of got shorter. So I think there's a whole load of things that are driving activity, tax being just one of them. But I certainly think it's a very active market, and I'm not sure why that would change. It seems to be almost a cultural shift.
And when you say a cultural shift, in the sense of people are setting up businesses, maybe at a younger age, different perspectives, but equally wanting to not hold on to it from maybe their 20s into their 50s kind of thing. I think it's much more awareness of kind of the concept of value creation and building something that is going to be attractive to sell. And I think that's kind of almost borrowed private equity wisdom, that the sort of, we've started off with this, where are we going to try and get to, and who's going to buy it at the end? You see that round far more private company boardroom tables than you used to. And certainly, I hardly ever come across a young entrepreneur whose intent is to hand it on to his kids or onto her kids. It just doesn't seem that people start off with the view of ending up with a family business. And I think that is a change. That is a change. And, the more capital there is, the more different sorts of private equity fund focused at different sorts of transactions in different parts of the market, which is something else we've seen, and debt funds that have come into the market that facilitate different sorts of transactions at different points in the business cycle. And so all of that is driving activity. We're talking about the intensive phase, and Matt, you're talking about maybe 8 weeks to get a deal away, which is brilliant. And but during that period, it's critical that you actually run the business. So James and Wendy, should the owner focus on either the deal or the business? Or does somebody have 36 hours in only 24-hour period now? What should they do?
Well, you go, James.
Well, I think we're aligned, Wendy, but In my view, always concentrate on the business. And if you're neglecting the business, it will come and bite you, massively so. If you can't afford, if the transaction is taking all of your time, you haven't planned appropriately. You haven't been preparing yourself appropriately. So, but Wendy touched on it earlier. Those businesses that aren't selling right now, if there's an event that might happen in the next 12 to 24 months, get a data room set up now. Start putting all of your key contracts in the data room. Have everything in one place. You know, you want to make this as painless as possible. It's good business housekeeping in any case. But if you take your eye off the business, in my eyes, it will come and bite you. And I always say that in order to get a good deal, you need to be prepared to walk away from the deal ahead of you. And that needs to be true. If you take your eye off the business, you become a little bit of maybe a distressed seller, which all impacts value. And no good comes of it, in my opinion. So I don't know, Wendy, were you
No, I would have said exactly the same thing. And I would always advise a vendor, you know, to work on the basis and the decisions that they make that the deal isn't going to happen, because there's no guarantees that the deal will happen. And as soon as you kind of take your eye off the ball, then it makes it less likely that it's going to happen. I do think, I suppose, as a corollary to that, though, that it is important that the deal is properly resourced. And one of the conversations one has with management teams, vendors, all of the time is, who should I tell? Who should I bring into the tent? And you know, usually you do probably need to bring your accountant or somebody in your finance team. You probably do need to bring in your PA, you know, somebody who's going to help you get the stuff into the VDR, and somebody who understands what's going on without kind of you having to creep in under cover of darkness and photocopy things. So I think the resourcing of the deal is to my point about momentum, it can slow things down, and does if somebody who's key to both, it hasn't got the bandwidth. So it's something to just think about before you start, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely echo all of that. And then at the same time, you get involved in negotiating those boring legal documents, having to work through due diligence. And also at that point, you've decided to launch a new venture or open a new business operation. Just need to sort of plan what is achievable. Yeah. So just sort of maybe moving to wrapping this up then. So maybe it's just me, but in my experience, owners who built up their businesses are low paid professionals. We are unnecessarily evil, but not so much accountants, but certainly lawyers. And probably one of the first conversations, how much is it going to cost me? So let's say you've got a £7 million deal. Any idea, Wendy James, as what you anticipate the cost to be in terms of doing it properly, and what proportion, and is there any benefit in trying to do it yourself?
Well, there's definitely no benefit in trying to do it yourself unless you know what you're doing, which most don't. And also, you know, to the resource point, it's actually quite helpful to have other people to help, and it's quite useful to have somebody that can be the bad cop when you don't want to be the bad cop. I think for a vendor, I think a £7 million deal, you know, you've probably really only got corporate finance fees and legal fees. So I don't know, what's that, 300 to 400k probably. If it's a private equity deal, the fees are a lot higher, and then it's kind of, some of them are yours and some of them are NewCo's. But I'm constantly gobsmacked by the fee budgets on private equity deals, I have to say. But you know, every sort of due diligence under the sun, NewCo legal fees, buy side advisors. You know, well, just as an indicator, we've just had an offer in on a deal which is just over 30 million, and the private equity fee budget is 2.5 million. Now, I think that's over-egged, but nonetheless, that's the kind of order. So it depends on what kind of deal you're doing, how complicated it is, and the quality of your advisors, I would also think. But I think as a kind of vanilla vendor, fee load, sort of 300 to 400,000 on a £7 million deal is probably about right.
Yeah.
You're going to.
Is that what you would expect?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you're driving a competitive process and you're creating value, absolutely. If the deal's set up and you're just giving some advice.
Oh yeah, hand holding would be cheaper.
Yeah, it'd be much different. But believe it or not, I've seen advisors actually try and do that same pricing structure when the deals or the head of terms are already signed. I have actually seen that. But the fee should be proportionate to driving value, and if you're going out and you're finding the buyer, and there's a value expectation and you exceed it, then you've done your job very well.
Yeah, no, exactly. Echo all of that. No, that's really useful.
I think, Tim, just to add to that, what I would
say
is giving advice to someone looking to sell their business. The one thing that is definitely worth spending money on is a good corporate lawyer, right? And HCI haven't paid me to say this, but genuinely, if you just want, someone and they know the business, but they're actually not really a corporate lawyer, paying extra for someone that knows what they're doing, knows the documents, can help walk you through, reams of quite complex corporate law, that is golden compared to trying to go through every page working out what it says. I mean, we always encourage the sellers to make sure they've got properly good corporate legal advice. That really helps with the speed and smooth transaction every time.
I think whiskey is on its way to you, Matt.
I think when Wendy and I would do the same, much like they would appoint a corporate finance advisor to lead the transaction. They're not appointing their local accountant. Do you say? So if their local lawyer is an employment lawyer, then they shouldn't be having an employment lawyer, perhaps. Running through this, so it's a point that I'm sure Wendy does the same. Is that we make. You need, because a deal can collapse through a lawyer not really understanding, it's just not being familiar with the process.
Or standing on lawyerly principle about points that don't really matter.
Yeah.
It is about experience of the specific sort of transaction that you're doing and knowing what battles to fight and what battles aren't worth fighting. And I think, I think there is nothing worse than there is nothing worse than a bad corporate lawyer on a deal.
I'm very happy you talk about bad corporate lawyers. No, I use the what if test. So if we ignore this point, what's the consequence? And you always need to focus on that what if, because in many cases it doesn't actually matter. Now you might negotiate it and play a game to get something else, but you actually need to always focus on that. So that's great. So rather than just closing on, sorry, James.
So I was going to say that level of pragmatism can actually save you a week at a time.
Yeah.
So just in conclusion, just sort of bringing this session to a close, other than just saying really important to appoint HCIs as legal advisors, any sort of couple of sentences in terms of conclusion as sort of the key messages you just want to bring out of this session?
I think for me, it's a bit trite to say preparation is everything, because lots said about kind of grooming and I think for me the preparation that you need to do is produce and develop and build the evidence that will support the value proposition. So if you're a recurring revenue business, then really focusing on analysing that data, being able to extrapolate it effectively, all of those things, the time that you spend doing that in the lead up to the process will just make so much difference to the value that you can not only get, but also kind of sustainably get to completion, which is a slightly different point.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree, and I'd say, as we touched upon, if you want a kind of really quick transaction, that quality of data is going to be important to that. And I think, obviously, I'm going to do the P sales pitch and say it's a really interesting option for vendors who want to de-risk, want to accelerate the growth of their own business, want to that additional capital support in order to go onto that growth journey. So it's definitely an option that should be considered, even given the negative media attention, as Wendy and James have kindly kind of said. those are rare occasions, and we often see the capital event on day one, but then the opportunity for a really significant capital event 3, 4, 5 years down the line. So it's a really good and exciting option for a lot of founders.
Okay.
I think,
sorry, James.
When Wendy and Matt have both said my number 1 and 2 being preparation and quality of information, the third one, a bit outside the box, is just kind of really understand what the value proposition is and so then you can explain it to your advisors, and then we can understand how we can kind of properly sell that. That's worth a lot, in my opinion, is understanding where can this business go, because you want to sell on that.
So as I mentioned earlier, we can now hear from someone who's been through the whole process, the good, the bad and the ugly. I'm delighted to be joined by Charlie White. Charlie, firstly, many thanks for supporting us in this discussion. Charlie is one of the original founders of Information Risk Management, which was sold in 2017. Post-deal, he remained with the company as its managing director. And risk management is now part of the Capgemini Group, which works to defend organisations against cyber threats. By way of background, the business was founded in 1998, and IRM provides visibility and control across entire cyber landscapes and supports organisations at every step of the cyber maturity journey. So it's very relevant to our discussion today. What I'd like to do, Charlie, is pick up on the topics discussed a moment ago. We now have the opportunity to see it from the perspective of the business owner who's been through it. And thank you for making the time available today, Charlie.
No problem.
Can I ask you to give a quick overview by talking about the point you decided to sell or to exit and to initiate some form of process, and give me a quick overview of where the business had got to at that stage?
Sure. I think, as Wendy alluded to in the piece that we just listened to, we never ever set IRM up with the intent of running it as a lifestyle business, or indeed with the intent to hand it down to family. I think that's probably a bit of an outmoded view. We set the business up nearly 20 years ago with the sole intent one day of arriving at either a public listing or a trade sale. So I think the points again that have been raised, and again Wendy made the point valiantly, you need to make sure that you have got something special and relevant in the marketplace that you're selling to. There's really, if you don't have anything special and it's not flavor of the month, it's going to be very, very difficult to sell a business. So I think we would have liked to have exited earlier, but I think it took us considerably longer to build uniqueness, to build the value proposition, as Matt was just mentioning, and building IRM to a stage where we were viewed as one of the primary protagonists and players within the cybersecurity marketplace. So it was growing the business to that stage where we were becoming recognized as one of the major players in the marketplace. And it was at that point that you have a bit of an inflection point where you need to decide, do we continue on this journey and try and grow it and become bigger and become better and all the other great things, or do we go and look for a trade sale? So that interesting point was not necessarily driven always by ourselves. So there was a number of things that happened within the cyber market that is pretty critical. One was that cybersecurity 3-4 years ago was becoming much more prevalent in the marketplace. A lot of the large IT vendors needed to have a better offer than the one that they currently had to offer their clients. And so we suddenly found that a lot of our traditional competitors, of which I would say that we ran in a pack of probably 8 or 9 companies, once a couple of those have been snapped up, it becomes quite obvious that the market is hotting up, trade buyers are out there, and again, I think as James or Wendy, I forget which, said, make sure that you have always got the people that didn't buy. So from some of our competitors that sold, there was clearly a list of those that didn't quite match the grade. So 17 years in, the market was hotting up. We had spent a lot of time building our value proposition and building our profile. I recall a sort of grey, drizzly afternoon sat probably 5 years ago, where I sat and quarter by quarter, I listed all the things that we needed to do to make sure that we were relevant and attractive to a buyer. And then we went over the next 2 years, we went through the process of ticking those things off on the list, so that we raised our profile, raised our credibility, raised our attractiveness to all the buyers that were out there. So carrying on and trying to grow that business constantly, it would have been fine. However, if you've got your running mates, your competitive running mates, all being sold to larger entities, then you will have a problem in so far that you're going to end up becoming perhaps what could be described as the squeezed middle. You haven't quite got the scale to compete with those much larger organizations, but yet you're way bigger than the smaller entrants coming into the marketplace, and trying to exist in that space is quite a difficult thing to do. So from my point of view, and my point of view and the view of the board and the view of the chairman, was now is the time to dress the company appropriately for a sale. I mean, I hope that answers the question.
That's brilliant. Yeah, no, that's
sort of full round
useful
view of it.
Yeah. And in relation to a sale, and you talked about itself, a flotation, or you focus on the trade sale.
Yeah.
Part of the discussion earlier with Wendy and James was and Matt, private equity.
Yeah.
Was that something that really you discounted, or did you look into it and then discount it, or was it something you decided at an early stage wasn't on offer?
I have to be very honest with you. We never really looked very heavily at private equity. Because I think private equity is fine, and Matt will probably kill me for saying this, but my view as an entrepreneur is that I'm more likely to get less cash up front and more of an earn-out, probably a more lucrative earn-out through the private equity route, whereas a trade sale, I'm probably more likely to get a better upfront number with not as much on earn-out.
Yeah, I probably agree with you. Yeah.
And as James was saying, and everybody was saying, do you spend your time focused on the business through a trade sale, or do you focus on the trade sale? I think you can never predict what's going to happen down the road. So a bird in the hand, getting the cash in, is a pretty critical thing to do. I mean, let's face it, let's be really, really honest. We went through a trade sale, and then 2-3 years later, we had COVID. What would our finances have looked like through all of that? And had we been going through a trade sale, would it have continued? How would our earnout look if we were with private equity? So to answer your question, I think the two options that we always had in mind were either a public listing, probably on AIM.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of the process of locating your buyer, Was it somebody you knew? Did you appoint a corporate finance house? How did you structure that? And that kind of competitive, the idea of getting a really good value is to have a competition between your buyers. Did you sort of engineer that?
We did. We very much did, yeah. We did use a corporate finance house. So we started the process by beauty parading the corporate finance houses. We had 5 originally, and we whittled it down to 3, and we got them to present to us. Actually, it was about having a beer with them and having dinner with them and seeing whether or not there was a cultural fit between what we were trying to achieve and what they could do for us. So we elected on a corporate finance house, and our first order of business was over the first couple of weeks to literally go through their entire list of potential targets and hone it and question why they're on the list. And we were also fortunate. We had a chairman, non-exec chairman at the time, who had been through many a trade sale, and so there was already an understanding that you're only going to get 1 times turnover with that particular entity, so just don't bother. And they're not going to change their minds, so just don't bother. So we chucked quite a few companies off the list. We obviously added a number of entities to the list. And back to my point earlier about the marketplace hotting up, I would probably receive 3 or 4 emails a week from organizations and companies wanting to acquire IRM. So providing that list was a great way of doing sort of shut up.
I imagine it was quite a tough call at that point, choosing one of them and going into what we call exclusivity, which prevents you talking to everybody else.
Yeah, as we whittled it down, we had first round bids, which we asked everybody to go back and sharpen the pencils, and as you would do, and everybody did, and the price significantly increased, and then we did enter into an exclusivity. But I think it was I think it was Matt or Wendy that said you make sure that whoever you have as the underbidders are still around, and that is about speed. That is about making sure that when you enter into exclusivity, the data room is full of everything. There's nothing that is missing. It means having the answers to every question that everybody can ever answer you ready and done. It's a lot of dress rehearsal, but you've run the business for a number of years. There shouldn't be any questions that should be too tricky for you. So we ended up in exclusivity for, I think, a week. And we then expected to have closure on the deal. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. So yeah, that's where we were.
So you're saying you were only under exclusivity for a week before the deal completed, and you talked to everybody else prior to that time. That's awesome. Yeah,
because we the data room was open to 3 or 4 companies that were in the final stage.
Okay.
They were all. I don't think they were aware of each other, but they were all plowing their way through endless contracts and doing all their lawyerly stuff. And then we ended up with final bids. Finance house tweaked some of the final bids a little bit, and then it was actually the company that acquired us in the end that said you need to end up in exclusivity now, otherwise we'll remove our bid. So we said fine. We were fortunate because we had another organization that was American that took a little bit longer to get everything all approved through New York, and so they were off trying to get a higher bid agreed in New York whilst we were running through exclusivity. So
good result. Yeah. And I think one of the key messages from James and Wendy was preparation is everything. And you've alluded to that. Did you get a team to manage that side in terms of data, putting the data together, information memorandum, putting the contracts into a data room? putting your accounts in a particular format that were acceptable. Often on deals such as yours, people produce a kind of vendor due diligence report that sets out all the information from a reputable organisation. Did you put all those building blocks in place before you went to the market?
We did. It is like running any business. As you scale up, as you get to a certain size, you can't continue to have everything on a sort of shared drive on the network at work, and folders for HR and finance and spreadsheets and whatever. You have to become more professional. So it was probably 2 years before we even went to market for a trade sale that we implemented a complete IT system that managed everything from the moment a client phoned up all the way through to sending an invoice, and then the finance systems at the back. So that gives you 2 years of demonstration that you know what you're doing, and you can build procedure into that, which makes it very easy to go through due diligence. Loading of the contracts into the data room then became considerably easier. But it was because, we were a business of, just over 120 odd people. You can't run a business of 120 people if you do not have systems at the back end that are competent and capable and take the thought process out of things.
And then picking up on the process and the team, did you prepare your management team? And I think somebody earlier talked about making yourself indispensable. Or was it always the case that you were going to carry on, Charlie, in the same role? Did you grant management options, EMIs, etc.? How did you get the team to stay and to motivate them to, I guess, build value up to the point of the exit?
So it was always very, very clear at the time that we decided that we would go towards a trade sale. I was really clear with everybody that I would stay and do a period of time, and then I wanted to go. That made the decision much easier then to look at bringing in a structure of management beneath me who effectively could take elements of my role and do those. So we had an absolute top drawer operations director that took an awful lot of the project management office and all the issues that we had with delivery away from me. I had an absolute top drawer finance director who did all the finance, got everything done. We employed an HR director at the time who came in specifically to do that. So by having a second layer of management, may appear to be quite expensive, but it meant that the buyers could see, well, if we took Charlie White out of the equation, this thing will continue to run because all the separate parts are actually allocated and placed down to all these other people. The grand scheme of life, if you put together a RACI, responsibilities, accountabilities, if you put a RACI matrix together for your organisation and have you with general oversight of everything, but everybody else accountable, then buyers are going to feel much more comfortable that they've got control over it without you having to be the linchpin. And having identified those people and put that organisational structure in place, we did indeed then put together an EIS scheme, and we incentivised them all by giving them share options. And again, I think James had mentioned, who do you have within the tent? Well, it was that management team, that all of which were in the tent and all of which firmly understood exactly what it is that we were doing. So they were part of the exercise, part of the solution, and they were earning out of it at the same time. So everybody's got the same goals.
Yeah, understandable. And in terms of sharing the load during the process, you talked about your chairman. did you sort of move him into the role so you could carry on running the business to an extent and he managed a deal, or did you try and do both?
No, in fact, it was once we'd elected which finance house to go with, he pretty much bowed out of it. So that's fine. But an awful lot of the data that people require is the finances, which you say you put the finances in the right format. We had a format because we were a smallish business that focused all our finances around cash flow. That was really typical.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go and sell to a Capgemini, that they don't they do care about cash flow, but cash flow is not the most important thing in their world. Having all their accounts in FRS 60 format is absolutely critical. So the accountant that we had spent a lot of time chunking the numbers through and sort of presenting it through every facet of the prism so that every audience could view that, and that was fine. So I did remain within the business, but again, I spent a lot of time with him managing this deal. And because I had a really competent management team delivering all the rest of the work, so from a sales director to an operations director to an HR director, the business actually was pretty successful on its own. It was a good proving ground that this business can operate without me having to be breathing down everybody's neck every 5 minutes.
Yeah. And did you manage to keep it secret other than the team that you wanted to know, or did it end up being known about by everybody?
I think to a great extent it did actually remain secret, because I remember a very fateful night at Harrison Clark Rickaby's in Cheltenham, and sort of 1 o'clock in the morning with poor Richard Knight trying to get the final signature on the final warranty and batting that one away. And we signed the deal, and the next morning at 9 o'clock, they were up to come and present with me to the staff.
Yeah.
So we've sold and do a presentation. So most of the staff at 9 o'clock in the morning were somewhat surprised. So I'm guessing it remained relatively secret.
Yeah, it's better than a deal I was working on where they sent the IT people to review the IT system in basically a van of the buyer, basically, with all their logo all across it, and it was their main competitor. So the question was, well, why would they be turning up with that? Just didn't think it through.
I mean, I find that amazing. I mean, we did. People wanted to come and visit the office. We want to come and see your office, part of due diligence. We want to know that it exists. So we would say, fine, yeah, absolutely no problem. You either come in at 7 or you come in at 9 at night. Choose which. But you're not coming in during the day.
Yeah. Well, that's the best approach, really. So in terms of how stressful was the process on a sort of simple scale of 1 to 10?
I had a lot of really good, competent people around me who took a lot of the stress away, because a lot of the day-to-day issues were removed from me. From the time that we appointed our financial advisors to the day we went through presentations and then exclusivity was probably, probably 5 or 6 months, something like that. So for 6 months, there is a constant stress on you that I do not need the numbers to fall down a hole this month. I want to ensure that the trajectory of the growth curve that we have presented remains to be the same way. So there, it was probably a lot of stress for me badgering people, going, it's not going to fall down a hole, is it? And everybody going, will you leave me alone? It's not. It will do if you just keep badgering me. So there was that. And, for owner managers, as I am absolutely sure Matt, James and Wendy and yourself have seen endlessly, I spent 20 years doing this with a view to becoming wealthy at the end of it. And it's stressful insofar that there is a chance that it won't happen, or there is a chance that it will fall down a hole and people will say, actually, we don't like it anymore. So that is stressful. and trying to keep a brave face on it and going into all those presentations. And I don't know what's the best way to describe it. Not being aloof, but you're not going into these presentations, or certainly at due diligence stage, to sell yourself. You're going in to hopefully make the other party realise they're very lucky that they're getting you. And we're not going to chip the price. That's just not going to happen. So it's a really tricky, like that's stressful because it's a new tactic.
New environment, isn't it? You're not used to it. Yeah. But I guess the benefit, if you sort of step back and say it's not life and death here, I have a really successful business, I'm wealthy, I'm successful. If somebody wants it, brilliant. If they don't want it, I'm not going to be destitute. I mean, it's a good way of approaching, isn't it? Putting in context.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely right.
And were there any horrible moments in terms of, from what you're saying, the buyer never got to the point where they chipped the price or alternatively changed the structure because you've done all of that homework before you got into that exclusivity and final negotiation stage?
Yeah, I mean, there were some hairy moments. I mean, I'm not going to repeat what Matt and James and everybody have just said, but I would please plead with everybody that is listening to this cast. If you're going to go for a trade sale, get a law firm that understands what you do and get lawyers that absolutely understand where you are at. We negotiated a couple of warranties. We had an enormous warranty based on software licensing and the fact that we were using open source software, and the other side's law firm, which was Magic Circle, didn't like it. We're not going to let go. Yeah. And, I take my hat off to Harrison Clark Rickaby's and to Richard Knight. He persevered, and in the end, it was 11:30 at night and everybody's tired and people want to go home. And he said, we're not going to move from the position that we're at. We're not going to give you that warranty. So I suggest that everybody goes home and we'll revisit it tomorrow. And off they went for an hour, and then they came back and that warranty halved. Yeah. Astonishing. Yeah. It's exactly as somebody has just said. Let's stop having lawyers that are standing on loyalty principles. It was just a loyalty principle because it wasn't really fully understood what was going on. But Richard, who, Harrison Clark Rickaby has been our lawyers for 20 years, Richard completely got it, understood it. So get good lawyers.
Well, what more can I say? And obviously you've carried on in the business, which is very different. And I guess many people have built up their own businesses where, if you like, you are head honcho, you're in control of the business. Within limits, you can sack people, change the direction of that business, and yet being submerged into a big organisation is probably quite a culture shock. How did you personally adjust to that? And obviously it's work because it's still there, but yeah, just some thoughts on that kind of issue.
Well, when we sold, one of the key documents that was put together was a post-merger execution document, which is really a roadmap of the things that are going to happen after acquisition. And within that document, it was very clear that we would be left alone for at least the first year. So we really carried on as we were for the first year, just sort of dipping into group treasury when we needed funds, which is delightful. So that was fine. I'm not going to say that every single one of the things that was promised got delivered. They didn't necessarily. Yes, I am still with the organisation. They are abundantly aware that I won't be forever, and already they are making moves to replace me, which is absolutely fine. I've got no problem with that at all. But I think I think you have to go into these things with your eyes wide open. I've heard all the things that people were saying previously about, you know, it's the entrepreneur's baby, and you know, when there's somebody sort of messes it up, it's really hard to deal with. And you know, I think I've been through every single one of those emotions, and my dear wife will attest to the fact that I sit and whinge and groan occasionally. But the decision was made to sell it. I think it was. Might have been Richard Knight actually that said to me, well, if it's not good, and if you really find that they've not done a good job, then give them the money back and go back to owning it. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. He said, right, shut up then. And that's sort of right. You know, if they want to, for all the people out there, if you sell your business and you become wealthy and you've got all the things that you wanted to have, if they then mess it up, that's on them.
Yes.
It's a hard thing to do, but it will take you a little bit to get that round your head, but it's not your place to tell them they can't.
No, exactly. You just have to let go to an extent. It's probably like your children turning 18, isn't it, really? It's let's make their own decision, good and bad.
That's a blessed relief when they stand there, although they just drain your bank account at that point.
Yes, we've all been there. Yeah. So just in terms of conclusion, I mean, to the extent you haven't said it already, is there sort of one or two key takeaways? Just in a minute.
I think the key takeaways are if you're gonna go and sell, great, find the right financial advisors, spend some time to find the right financial company. Absolutely, if your business has been predicated on a law firm that specialises in employment law, and that's really all you've ever done, then go and find a proper corporate team within, you know, House of Clark Rickaby's or wherever it happens to be, because you're going to need good quality lawyers, and then spend time with them so that you understand what you do. And that, you might, well, you know, if they're going to charge me to spend time with them and then they're going to charge me to do the deal, that doesn't sound like a very fair option. Well, you know, no, it probably isn't, but suck it up, because it needs to be done. And dress the business. Spend some time to dress the business. And if you are an owner, manager, whatever, founder, do not make yourself so that you are irreplaceable. A lot of owner managers want to do that because they want everybody to know that, oh, look what a brilliant job I've done. You can't replace me. Well, most buyers will run away going, well, I'm not buying you, I'm buying the company, so therefore I'm just going to run away. So make yourself dispensable. I think that's probably one of the reasons why our chairman disappeared, because he'd been through this so many times before and knew, I'm not going to meet anybody, I'm off.
Brilliant.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
No, that's absolutely brilliant, Charlie, and that's really appreciated. So I think really I could just bring this session to a close. I just want to thank James, Matt, Wendy and Charlie for contributing today. It's been really appreciated on our part. I guess I've certainly learnt a lot, and I think Charlie said it all. None of us build up as business owners and do it for fun. At the end of the day, you want to build something of value, pass it on, and who you pass it on to and on what terms are the key questions. And as no one has learned the ability to dodge death at some point, this has to be a common goal for everybody. And one of the key messages I think that's come across is that, like everything in life, it's worth having. It does not happen overnight. I really hope that you've gained an insight into the process and the thinking behind a transaction, how they're structured and what contributes to a successful outcome. And we're more than happy to chat through anything that's been discussed today and give you and the panel to give you their insights. So I just want to say thank you for joining us today and being part of today's programme. Good afternoon.
Thank you.